Have you ever thought about people that become more successful, and as they become more successful, it's almost like they start to doubt themselves more, almost like an imposter syndrome thing, but maybe not exactly like that. Like I found maybe it comes with the more responsibility. I find as I take on more and more, and I quote quote move up in life, in a sense, that there does seem to be more of a pressure. I don't know if it's because the standard that you have to hold yourself to is higher, but it's almost because you would think, well, I'm more capable now than I was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Yeah. But then you could also think in some way, I had a lot more confidence back then too. And again, in some degree, these are really loose terms, but what do you think about that? As people become more successful, sometimes they become more self-critical, I suppose.
I like that. I think it comes with the responsibility, because it's something every therapist struggles with, imposter syndrome, I'm pretty sure. And probably every good therapist does, because you should definitely question yourself, right? And then as you have people coming to you and their life is a complete mess and they feel like they can't handle it, they can't keep their life together, and they're trying to throw it all on you. And then that's a ton of responsibility. And then it's as you find the right balance of, it's not entirely my responsibility. I have my professional responsibilities to you, yet your life is still your responsibility. You get a little bit of confidence back as you learn where to place that. But there's being an early therapist, feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders because it's the weight of the world on all these people's shoulders, and they're all coming to you for answers. But they need to find the answers. You don't actually quite give them the answers. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that's in conflict with sort of the Christian idea of like dying for the sins of the world, like taking all the sins of the world onto you? Because this is something that I've been thinking about lately as well, that like maybe that isn't a good thing to sort of to bear someone else's sins.
Christ is supposed to do that, but I don't think any human mortals are supposed to do that entirely. I would say, yeah.
Well, it gets confusing for me because Christ is often portrayed as like the ideal in Christianity. Yeah. So, but yeah, but see, this is what makes Christianity so confusing sometimes, because Christ is sort of the ideal, but he's also the God, and he's also the Son of God. Yeah. And so it's like maybe it is like the God that is taking all that on.
To find that line where you're supposed to be good and you're supposed to kind of serve God, but then you're not God, right? Not having the God complex that you think you're God, right? There's some line in between there where you do take a lot on you. That you certainly admire that part that takes on things. Sorry, I had a thought there for a moment. One thing was, reading I think it's the Sermon on the Mount. One of the things, and that's where there's the line about turning the other cheek. But one of the things it says in there is that it's really written for the disciples of Christ. But that doesn't necessarily, well, at least the way I read it, doesn't necessarily mean anybody. It's almost like a thing that says, how is a philosopher supposed to behave, right? How are, the priests supposed to behave? Because you're showing everyone an example. That doesn't actually mean that's the rule for everybody's day-to-day life, or that everybody needs to be judged by. Rather, that's the ideal, right? Like the Stoic, the sage. It's an ideal to strive for. It doesn't mean that you're awful when you don't get there.
Right. It's kind of like the paradox of the Stoics would say, you get to choose to not be offended by something that someone else says, yet also be against offensive speech.
Yeah.
It's like, I guess that's really justice in a sense. It's like, it's so interesting because it's like, as a Stoic, if an injustice is imparted on you, it's almost like, yeah, that's just an opinion that it's an injustice. Right. But at the same time, you fight for justice for others. It's sort of a weird paradox.
Right, that I still don't do that. And then that is putting quite a weight on your shoulders, right? That everyone else gets to do it and I don't do it. And yeah, I think that's a lot of the moral, ethical virtue.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of like Marcus Aurelius' quote of be tolerant of others, but harsh on yourself.
Yeah.
And which actually, then that's kind of interesting too, because then Seneca also said, well, be a friend to yourself. Yeah. So I think it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, again, that's like paradox, a paradox.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Cause it's interesting, that balance between being harsh on yourself, yet also just kind of, again, like being a friend to yourself, like how you would treat a friend. I mean, sometimes we say things to ourselves that we would never say to anyone else.
Yeah. Right. But that's not justice either, right? That's not justice to yourself.